And I now turn the service over to Yarn, to Giancarlo and Carol.
Thank you very much, Reverend Ketchian. Again, very happy and grateful to be here. Um, as was mentioned, I grew up Unitarian Universalist, and um, it's been sort of woven into my identity growing up. And um, so I'm just so grateful and lucky to have found yarn. Especially in 2020. So, especially isolating time during the COVID lockdowns. The Young Adult Revival Network was founded in response to the need for a global community of Unitarian Universalist young adults. Our faith has long needed a movement dedicated to caring for, developing, and retaining uh, adults between the ages of 18 and 39 or so. And so that need was felt especially in 2020 when the isolation of the COVID-19 lockdown caused many to feel isolated and alone. This was an especially tough time for me as someone who graduated college in 2020 and having missed out on the last semester and graduation. Um, and so it was just so great to have a virtual community. Um, and so that's sort of what it was created in response to. And through monthly worship services developed by aspiring faith leaders and their lay peers, workshops and other programs, Yarn was able to stave off the isolation and ease the uncertainty experienced by many during this turbulent period. Um, and over time, Yarn grew and became known for its young adult focused mission. And thanks to the supports that we've received, we have been able to expand, and eventually we were joined by Carol, who is now the community director. And this has been incredible for programming, where thanks to what we're now able to do, holding large scale virtual conferences or conlines, um, helping young adults start their own local young adult chapters, um, regional groups, and affinity groups, and other programs, chaplaincy, and other services. And so it's just been such a privilege to be a part of this process, and it is a privilege to talk about this with you all now. And with that, I will turn it over to Carol.
Thank you. That was a really beautiful and accurate introduction. And now we're going on a journey into intergenerational connection. So this Sunday morning, we are here sharing a virtual sanctuary. It might remind us of other spaces that we share as well, like a physical sanctuary, a library, a park, an educational or a healthcare institution. We arrive here as we do in those other places. And if we notice each other, there's a realization that we are indeed in different stages of life. And here I propose you a question for reflection. How can we look within and beyond the age gaps to overcome prejudice and find healthy ways to forge the future of our living tradition? We might not necessarily arrive at a precise, thorough answer this morning, but I hope we feel more encouraged and called to approach intergenerational differences from a place of understanding, solidarity, and sacredness. Recently, it has been somewhat easy to find mentions of the current living generations in social media, popular culture, and overall the news. And these mentions usually start with the baby boomers who were born between the mid-1940s and the mid-1960s, passing through the Generation X that claims people from the mid-1960s to the 1980s. And then we have the millennials from the early 80s to the late 90s. And then finally, the Generation Z or Gen Z that finally encompasses folks who were born between the late 90s and the early 2010s. To each one of these generations, stereotypes, tendencies, strengths, and weaknesses are attributed. And the acceptance of stereotypes as a solid truth might rise from not processing the misunderstandings, the ignorance, and the lack of willingness to truly know each other beyond the surface. There is a lot of information out there trying to explain why, for instance, our perceptions of topics such as life, work, humor, religion, and family might sound so radically different from each other. Generational shock can feel very intense, and it can become an unsettling experience when one doesn't feel understood, accepted, or validated when interacting with someone from a different generation. So let's try to approach generational differences with honesty and goodwill. Behaviors, expressions, fashion preferences, and expectations for the future might be different. But just like the multiple scriptures we draw inspiration from as Unitarian Universalists, they shouldn't be interpreted and judged out of context. For instance, if someone isn't going through the challenges of young adulthood anymore, but simply witnesses how current young adults react to their own challenges without keeping a curious mind about the root issues, they are getting a very limited glimpse of what young adulthood looks like nowadays. There is the risk of falling into the trap of thinking that, for instance, young adults these days have a mentality of entitlement and that they don't want to work to achieve their dreams. And this reminds me of a Seattle-based alternative band called Fleet Foxes. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of them. And they have this song called Helplessness Blues. It was released in 2008, so it was in the context of the market crash. And one of the lines, perhaps the most striking one, says, quote, "If I had an orchard, I would work till I'm sore," end quote. And I think it can be interpreted as that there's a willingness and an eagerness to work and give your best, but it needs to be fruitful, which isn't often the case nowadays with the inflation and the cost of living crisis, for example. So considering all of that, how can someone claim to retain an inner youth, to be young at heart, without remaining curious and questioning? I propose this question. On the other hand, younger generations also need to remember that they're not going to be forever young. And that whenever another person invalidates their struggles or even acts in an offensive way, they should criticize the argument and not the fact that the person who said it is older. Generations are a product of many factors, and some of them are beyond our individual control. We as adults, gifted with the capacity of reasoning, are also responsible for reevaluating what we have learned and overcoming prejudice or whatever needs improvement. Let's take some moments to imagine how radically different the world was some time ago and how the world has changed in the past couple centuries. Our planet Earth and its societies have experienced unprecedented changes. So let's foster a spirituality that considers daily life struggles, even the ones we cannot personally relate to. There are some traits and tendencies frequently associated with young adults, like a boldness in character, creativity, innovation, and courage. However, they also have needs that deserve to be addressed and validated. There might be, indeed, fearlessness in their actions, creativity in their expressions, and adaptability in their efforts. But there is also exhaustion and even hopelessness in dealing with challenges such as the cost of living crisis affecting young adults worldwide. Generations aren't monoliths, but they can be seen as a starting point for understanding our differences, guiding our learning efforts, and hopefully moving toward solidarity and collaboration. I trust that beyond being granted representation in congregational policies, for example, the act of learning with each other and from each other might help us develop a sense of solidarity and mutual understanding. Last year, I was able to virtually attend an adult education program hosted by the Star King School for the Ministry, based in California. And the name of the program was UU Ups and Downs, Lessons from the Past. That was the title. And our teacher and mentor throughout the journey was the Reverend Dr. John Behrens, who's an experienced scholar, minister, and former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Through history and scholarship and storytelling, I was able to dive into the bigger picture of Unitarian Universalism, something that is simultaneously older than all of us here and also ever evolving, moving into the future. The program explored how our faith has gone through moments of optimism, expansion, joy, and positivity, but also crisis, uncertainty, and challenges. As the classroom learned about the complexity and the patterns of change that took place in our faith movement throughout the years, Dr. Behrens acknowledged something that felt like a really needed realization. He explained how there are many forces guiding the ups and downs of Unitarian Universalism, but some of them are out of our control and sphere of action as individuals and faith communities, such as demographics, politics at some level, and climate. To recognize that might feel scary because uncertainty can indeed feel scary, especially when it is related to something that matters to us as our communities, our faith tradition. But that also opens the possibility, working on what we can do. That is, investing in being together and immersing ourselves in multiple realities and perspectives. And that's something that the intergenerational relationships can offer. I'd like us to remember the African concept of Ubuntu. That means I am because we are. We are indeed interconnected in our differences. When generational conflicts or misunderstandings happen and arise in a community, let's approach them with grace. Let's avoid the temptation of judgment and also recognize our own privilege and how they might interact with the generation each one is a part of. Let's be aware of power and balance. Our tradition is marked by the belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. May it keep us away from the risk of being cynical when facing these challenges. Much of what makes community life possible relies on the processes of decision making. So let's remind ourselves that neutrality might not exist, but a deliberate commitment to the acknowledgement of biases and the representation among generations are possible. The next chapters in the history of our faith are going to be written by today's younger generations. What would we aspire them to sound like? Are we going to feel challenged if stories are phrased in ways that question our current convictions? Let's talk. Let's share space and time and see how our experiences shape our stances and positions. Now I call you to meditate on a poem attributed to Rumi, the Persian poet and spiritual inspiration for many Unitarian Universalists. And it's called On Aging. And it was adapted to our service. It starts like this. Why does every beautiful face grow in old age, wrinkled like the back of a lizard? Why is the tall, straight figure now bent almost double? Why is it that the lion's strength weakens to nothing? The wrestler who could hold anyone down is let out with two people supporting him, their shoulders under his arms. God answers. They put on borrowed robes, and they pretend they were theirs. I take the beautiful clothes back, so that you will learn the robe of appearance is only a loan. Your lamp was lit from another lamp. All God wants is your gratitude for that. As we take a few moments to meditate on the words by Rumi, I'd like to say that whether you personally identify with the idea of God or not, reality is much wider than our own limited personal experiences. The intentional choice to place ourselves in a vibrant, respectful, beloved intergenerational community is also a way of honoring not only the generations that are yet to come and yet to be labeled as well and our ancestors, but most urgently, it's a chance to celebrate ourselves. We're sharing this time together today and beyond, hopefully. And as we leave the sacred environment, let us remind ourselves that we are part of an interconnected web of existence, as expressed by our seventh principle. We span across generations, time zones, and borders. Let us accept our differences, respect our boundaries, and grow together in love, respect, and service. May it be so. May we make it so. Thank you.
If you like this video, Please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.